Hi, I'm Warren Zenna, founder and CEO of the CRO Collective, and welcome to the CRO Spotlight Podcast. This show is focused exclusively on the success of chief revenue officers. Each week, we have an open, frank, and free-form conversation with top experts in the revenue space about the CRO role and its critical impact on B2B businesses. This podcast is the place to be for CROs, sales and marketing leaders who aspire to become CROs, and founders who are looking to appoint a CRO or want to support their CRO to succeed. Thanks for listening. Now let's go mix it up.
As some of the listeners know, I have a couple of affiliations with some conferences. One is, Gerhard Schwander's Sales 3.0 event, which I do some stuff there. And frequently Gerhard has me moderate panels and speak and stuff. Anyway, one of the panels I recently moderated, Daniel was on the panel, and it turns out that we have something very interesting in common, which is we both lead chief revenue officer courses. And that was great because, there's more of them popping up. As you know, I have one, Pavilion has one, and then Daniel runs the one at the University of Chicago, which is a great institution. And so aside from doing something that we're both obviously like-minded on, we also had a great time together. We ended up spending like 3 hours talking, and we ended up just really seeing eye to eye on a lot of things. I think he's just a super person. And then we hung out a little bit, and I thought it would make sense to have him join me on this platform so we can discuss this, because I think we're both in agreement that this is needed, that the CRO training is necessary, and I thought we could have a discussion. So to that end, Daniel, welcome to the show, and thanks for being here.
Happy to be here, Warren. Thanks for having me.
Great. So, why don't you give everyone a little background? Like, how did you end up teaching a CRO course at the University of Chicago? How did that sort of happen for you?
Sure. So, my career in sales really started, I guess, in earnest at Groupon, but kind of like yourself, long time before that. Growing up in a entrepreneurial and sales family, the family business that put all the kids through college was a distributorship of electronics assembly equipment and supplies called Midwest Tech Services, based out of Willowbrook, Illinois. Mm-hmm. Spent 9 years working there doing customer service, a little bit of sales, carrying boxes, packing boxes in the warehouse as a kid. So I spent a lot of time growing up around a sales environment. I also came from a big family with 32 cousins and 16 aunts and uncles, and literally to a person, almost every single person is in sales of one kind or of another. And so it's kind of the environment I grew up in, but it's also one I took for granted. I started my professional career in hedge funds and did that for 5 years, and then went to business school and got into management consulting. But then I had a friend, almost an acquaintance really, who was aware of an opportunity at Groupon. He actually wanted to do this job, but they told him they wanted to stick where he was. And he knew me and just said, "Hey, you should check this thing out. I think you'd be a great fit for it." And it was really insightful on his part because I had no background in technology or in sales, no interest in technology or sales. But I said, "Yeah, I'll take the interview, check it out." And it just felt like I had come home. I just felt like I was in the right place. And what the role was a general manager role for a region at Groupon, but it was largely sales management, which is kind of ironic to be a manager of salespeople when you've never really sold anything in your whole life, And Yep. So it was a strange position to be put in, but I found a lot that I could do a lot by listening to my employees and just finding ways to support them, but then kind of take what I learned from them and use that to guide the success that we had. And we ended up having a lot of success at that organization, and that led me to running another company when one of our finance guys went back into private equity and pulled me over there, and then went from there to be the head of sales and marketing, basically CRO at one of our biggest clients, and that was an agency at Omnicom, part of BBDO. And From there, I left there to go to Boston Consulting Group to be global topic lead for B2B go-to-market for private equity held companies, which is a very long way of saying basically the CRO topic.
Yep.
And so at that point, I had been, more or less the CRO role or something equivalent 3 times, and was working with a bunch of the world's leading technology companies and non-technology companies, and especially the funds that owned and invested in these companies. And that was a great jumping off point, after a couple of years doing that, to actually work on starting my own business. But while I was in the course of doing that, that's when the University of Chicago said, hey, we're thinking about a RevOps program. Would love some of your input on it. And we talked about that for a little bit. But I said, from working with a lot of these funds at University of Chicago, or at Boston Consulting Group, one of the things I've seen is that they really struggle to hire first-time CROs and identifying who would be good CRO talent, because it's a bunch of finance guys and gals who are great at what they do, but there's a big experiential sort of cultural component to identifying who's going to be a great leader of sales and marketing if you've never done that job, right? Very few of these folks have hands-on experience being salespeople or being marketing people. And so that was sort of what I saw as the demand side problem, is that the funds that do a lot of the hiring of first-time CROs struggled to identify the right talent. And they kind of knew this, so they would basically recycle the same people through a limited number of CRO roles as a result of that. But then on the supply side, very few folks are put in a position to succeed based on their background the first time they become a CRO, because they've got to be responsible for the full customer life cycle, from SDR teams to customer success teams and account management and account execs closing new deals and all the above, as well as RevOps, pricing strategy, all these topics that very few folks have exposure to, but then have to be responsible for once they get that first CRO gig. And so they have to learn on the job a lot. And so in this conversation with the university, basically what we identified was there's a really big opportunity to create a university program that has all of the heft and substance and weight that you would expect from the University of Chicago, and would help close this gap in the market, give the CROs, the would-be CROs, the skills that they need to be great at the job as the first time, or even if they're a repeat CRO at this point, if they want to get some real high-quality professional education, and also make it easier for private equity and venture capital funds to hire first-time CROs, because it's kind of speaking their language to put a big university symbol on top of a resume. So helps that stand out there. And then obviously provide the network to find all these opportunities for the folks in the program.
Got it. Well, it makes sense. And
was that enough of an answer for you?
That's great. I mean, I agree with everything you said there. I mean, we almost came to the same exact conclusion in different ways. Certainly both recognized a real hole in the marketplace, which is not only just your observation that hiring CROs is hard and it doesn't work a lot, and even more so, I think, from you and I talking, it's also just the role is not defined. I mean, people don't really know what one does. Most of the time, CROs don't do the right thing when they get hired in the first place. And so, the role is too ambiguous. It's almost, I think, in a way, it's a bit of an avatar that people can make would do anything they want, as opposed to it being exactly what it's supposed to be. And so it's so malleable that a CRO can go to a company and sort of not know what it's like a box of chocolates from, Forrest Gump.
What's expected of me.
Yep. And this is a big issue, because the role should be more defined and it should have much clear definition, and therefore it's more codified across organizations what it does and how to bring one on. And so you and I are both in our own way helping to make that happen. And I think it's great. So
Warren, I got a question for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
When you're working with the companies that you work with, how do you sort of define for them, what's the little couplet that you say, this is what the CRO role should be, this is how you should think about this job?
Yeah. So what I tell them is kind of like have a rote answer to this question. First thing I say to them is what a CRO isn't. Okay. A CRO
Yep.
is not a head of sales. It's the first thing I say, right? And the reason I say that is because most of the time
Absolutely.
that's what they think it is, right? So I'm immediately sort of intentionally challenging their current thinking, and that's provocative for them. And they're like, "Well, okay, well, explain that to me." Well, and I explain the idea that what's the problem with having a CRO as a head of sales is it sort of perpetuates a problem that you, Mr. Founder, are perpetuating in a way, which is you're creating silos of organizational leadership by having a CRO, a CMO, a CSO, which, in your
CPO.
world,
Yep.
the sort of corporate blueprint is to have all these C-suite executives oversee these functions, but that's really a crony way to look at a business. The reality is what you're doing is you're creating silos and you're codifying them by making these people C-suite executives. Now they're immovable because they have C on their title, right? So you're building, in fact, a unbreakable silo organization by doing so. And the revenue operation is the one organization of all that not have silos or else it can't work. So the endemic issue with a company, the congenital disease of a B2B company is revenue misalignment. That's the thing we're fixing here. And revenue misalignment is when all three of these organizations are sort of not operating on the same page. The only way to get that to happen is you need to have one person lead all of it. And the chief revenue officer is the person who's most appropriate for that role. So the definition of a chief revenue officer is someone who doesn't run sales, but oversees the entire revenue function. That means sales, marketing, customer success. I define it as the three most customer-facing parts of the business. Sometimes maybe they might have a little bit of an influence on product, depending upon the company, and certainly sometimes partnership, strategic growth, right? But mostly it's really overseeing the way and coordinating and aligning an orchestration between sales, marketing, customer success from a customer-centric, customer journey perspective. So that's how I define the role.
I like that, especially the emphasis on the customer centricity and the alignment internally, because specific to the one, of the 7 courses in our program, the one that I teach is that's basically session 1 and session 10 is exactly what you just described.
Great. Yeah. And it's the reason why I believe it should be is a couple of reasons. One is the obvious, which is, what's more important than the customer. I think we have as a B2B organizational, ecosystem, we've completely lost the plot on customers. We ignore them at this point. They're basically just like cannon fodder, And what's weird is because there isn't anybody that doesn't answer this question the same way. When I ask them this question, I say, where do you get most of your money from? And they say, existing customers, right? Sure, of course you do. Because it's cheaper to get business from existing customers and, it's less, cost that is required to get them. And also, customers are better people to sell to than getting new ones. That doesn't mean you should stop acquiring new customers, but not at the expense of taking care of the experience of your ones that are existing. And so given that, if you know that to be true, well, then why would you not have a customer-centric go-to-market strategy? That should be the way you operate. As soon as someone goes into the customer bucket, there should be an entire focus on the way that customer is taken care of, such that that outcome is realized from whatever they purchased, and that a renewal or an upgrade or whatever is possible. But it doesn't work that way. And so if a chief revenue officer comes into the job with today's muscle memory from a sales and acquisition perspective, that CRO can be dangerous in that you have a leader who's responsible for acquisition only as like a mercenary, as opposed to someone who's taking care of people who've paid already. So I think the customer-centric CRO is a vital part of the job. It's not just a sort of a nice to have, it's a must.
Yeah, and you have to break that muscle memory too when you go from revenue VP from what you used to do to having the whole life cycle perspective and the profit perspective instead of the close this deal perspective. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
By the way, Warren,
Sure.
as always, you have just great lingo. So far, I've picked up 2 new ones from you. One of them was the congenital disease of revenue misalignment, which is definitely going in my back pocket. Okay. And then you just said, was it lost the story, lost the narrative? Was you said there?
I don't know. I'll send you the recording.
Lost the storyline. Lost the storyline. It's great.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. It's because what we've done is we've gotten too smart for our own good, right? We created, this is sort of like a origin story in a way. I'll share this when we do our session together with your students. Is what's happened is the SaaS business in particular was almost too successful. So what happened was people were becoming billionaires, right, from technology. And this is very attractive to investors. If they see an opportunity like that where businesses can scale that quickly, well, then they're going to invest a lot of money in them. But they're investing in money in them for a reason that benefits them. I'm not saying I don't want to denigrate them. It's a good business model, right? Why not find a company that can churn out customers like this? It's a good business model. But it comes at the expense of the customer. And so what ended up happening was, the unicorn chasing became sort of like the mantra for investment communities. And what they did was they started to create management processes that were designed to manage multiple companies within a portfolio that was a formula. And that formula was based on customer acquisition. Because if you acquire more customers, that action or that event of acquisition of customers was the thing that triggers a lot of the ways in which money becomes reinvested again. It's like the temperature gauge, if we can continually get more people to sign up for something, not only are we getting more revenue in, but it's an indicator that the market likes the product, which means we'll give it more money. And it sort of created a incentive to do something that, while was good, it was a cancer because it grew a part of the organization without recognizing the importance of the other part of the organization, which is customers. And so the SaaS business, its success and formulaic success also resulted in a lot of technologies that were developed. Think about all the tools that was built in tech to help support this. All the calling tools and the dialers, and I mean, it's insane. And so
SaaS developed to
even
SDRs,
SDRs,
sell SaaS.
you mentioned them before. I think SDRs are a cancer too, in my opinion. Not to denigrate SDRs themselves, but they are. And the reason is because, it's not, I mean, if I hire a bunch of people that all their job is just make phone calls and send out emails all day long at a high level of activity, it's going to flood the marketplace with outbound messages that are going to turn customers off and they're not going to listen to anything anymore, which is exactly what's happening. And so, I think that, the CRO role is more important today than ever because of the fact that now the chief revenue officer, if it's implemented in the way that you and I are describing, can recalibrate these things and bring much more customer centricity and orchestration across the whole revenue stream. But I think companies desperately need and customers want. So this is sort of like, I think that the timing is good for this role to be sort of reevaluated or realized in a way. So I think we've both maybe accidentally or brilliantly, I don't know, stumbled onto what I think is a good opportunity in the marketplace.
I like the second explanation better. Great minds think alike.
Okay, fine. So I don't know. I mean, I step in crap all the time. I don't know what I'm doing half the time, but it worked. So it's good. And I think that there's an opportunity, and I'm glad to see organizations like as reputable as yours. I think it's great. I think there's another one too. Isn't Wharton doing one as well? I think there's a couple other colleges that are right. Isn't that true?
There is a well-known university that created a knockoff program.
Sure.
I announced one a month after we went live.
But yeah, I mean, look, I get it, and I knew that there were going to be other people coming into the marketplace, and we'll all have our slice of the pie, I suppose. But I think it's good because, as I mentioned to you too, and I'd like to get your point on this. What are your thoughts on? Okay, so your factory and my factory, at least part of my factory, is intending to produce and manufacture competent CROs that can go to a marketplace and get the job and, kind of come in with the right competencies or approach.
Yep.
But, the other side of the equation is now they're going into companies that aren't ready for them, or they're not prepared for one, or they don't know what to do with one. So it doesn't matter, like if I buy a really expensive appliance and I don't know how to use it, it's just going to sit in my garage. So
that's right.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on how that could be mitigated from your perspective.
Well, that's where Warren Zenna comes in, right? The CRO Collective.
Okay. I don't know. I'm curious what your thoughts are though on it. I mean, have you given this thought, like about the environment that you're sending your students into, as opposed to just getting them competent? Because it's a marriage, of sorts.
Yeah, I think that's right. I have a couple thoughts on that. One is, in congruence with what I described before about the inspiration for the program in the first place, there's currently more of a need for CROs than there is a supply of CROs. So there's more opportunities than there are well-qualified bodies, and hence that recycling of the same people into the same jobs, even some folks that don't necessarily do a great job. On the other hand, That doesn't mean that every opportunity is created equal. I can tell you from my own experience that I have, worked at a couple different companies in the CRO role, and some of them were more prepared than others, and they were all not terrible, not perfect, and they were also better and worse in different ways. And there are a number of factors involved in that, right? I think one thing you have to think about is the preparedness to be able to invest in go to market. You know, you can find yourself as a CRO going into a new opportunity with a company that wants to grow, and you can come in and deliver great results and find that you don't necessarily have a CFO, CEO, investor mindset of investing in growth. They'll continue to want more with less, right? And it's not necessarily putting the CRO in a position to win in that role. It's also not going to necessarily be a great, kind of one of the many paths in your overall career trajectory. Another thing to think about is basically the culture of the C-suite, right? How collaborative is a department dynamic? Are people comfortable being expert in their domain, or does everybody want to think that they are, the head of everything? Is it 5 junior CEOs, right? And that's a really important thing, in particular as a CRO, because not that you're supposed to be out there like a VP sales closing deals all the time and collaborating with your sales org, but it's still going to be part of the job. Visiting, meeting with customers. If it's not, you're not doing the job right because you don't have direct contact with the customers. You need to be having those direct conversations to inform the decisions that you're making at the top of the organization, right? And as is always the case with everybody who visits customers, you're spending more time out of the organization and you're just a little bit less part of the internal kind of culture and politics and dynamics that are, not everybody's favorite part of working in a company, but it's an important part of working in a company. And so, understanding what that dynamic is, and is that something where the revenue organization is going to be at a loss for every time that you go and visit customers? Because if it is, then you're making sort of a Faustian choice between, do I stay culturally strong and connected to the sort of palace dynamics, or am I going to be customer centric? Well, you need to be able to do both, and if that C-suite culture isn't right, then you're not going to be in a position to succeed there.
Yeah, okay, all good. I agree completely. And I think the problem I'm seeing in the market is that people who are looking for chief revenue officer jobs, a lot of them, unfortunately, are looking for a title. They like the title. It's attractive. It's alluring. It represents that they've ascended to a certain status. It comes many times, not all the time, with more money, right? More financial opportunity. Certainly, it also brings to them more future opportunities. I mean, if I have a CRO on my resume, it gives me the opportunity to get other C-suite roles. People want to break into that C-suite because it represents other things to them that sometimes cloud their judgment in terms of what the CRO role really is that they're getting themselves into. And they can very easily be seduced, by the stuff that comes with a C-suite title, regardless of how it's going to be. And I see a lot of people who I work with whom kind of come to me later and they go, yeah, they made all these promises. It was really great. And I listened to things and I knew there was a problem, but I just ignored it because I really wanted this job. And, it's like anyone who's, maybe had a bad marriage, you look back, you go, yeah, I saw the signs, but I said I do anyway. And now look at me, I got no house, And so, I think that there's like some degree to which I'm also trying to get people to think a little bit more strategically about this role so that they're not just jumping into it because someone's hanging a nice gig in front of them, because it could be really difficult. It's not like a sales job. This is a tough job. And if it doesn't work, it could be really bad. You don't want to fail as a CRO. It doesn't look good, So I'm curious, like when you are working with your cohorts, are you talking about these sort of things with them? Like, what's your thoughts on how they should be approaching the role?
Well, I think one thing that I've noticed is, we'll put it this way. Are you familiar with John Boyd by any chance? The Air Force guy, invented the OODA loop, all this kind of thing. It's a great book about him. I think it's just called Boyd, Boyd. But really an amazing individual. It's like a military real life version of Good Will Hunting, or of I guess Will Hunting from the movie Good Will
Yep.
Hunting. So Good Will Hunting, obviously, I don't know if anybody's not seen the movie, but
Yeah, of course.
the point of the analogy is a guy who was of really incredible genius, but not super formally educated, more self-learned, and presumably in the movie went on to do great things in mathematics.
Yep.
I think it cuts a little short to see where that goes. But this guy, John Boyd, real amazing leader overall, but not in the traditional organizational sense. And he came up with a bunch of different things, but one of his kind of separate from his three major contributions to a couple different fields of study was just this quote that you can basically either be somebody or do somebody or do something, like somehow something like that. But the gist is basically there are folks who want the role and folks that want to do the work and have the impact and be purpose driven versus title and status driven.
Got it.
And the importance between those two things as it pertains to the CRO role, I think, is that you're going to get found out pretty quick if you want to be the title and the status and be Mr. C-suite guy and that kind of thing. You have to be really purpose driven on making an impact at a company by making an impact for customers. And if you're not those things, you'll get found out pretty quick, because either the results that everybody know could be there that haven't been yet aren't going to happen for you, or the company's already doing well and for some other reason they're changing CRO and you're taking over, things are going to head south pretty quick, because you're going to make decisions with the intent that you have, which is to make yourself look and feel more important. And those are not going to have the decisions that customers and salespeople need to grow the business.
I love it. And I agree. It is a very high exposure role. You can't hide, as a CRO at all. In fact, you're in like a fishbowl your entire every day, and everyone's observing you. And I do see the imposter syndrome can seep in, because a lot of people, you're right, they chase the role and now they're in the job and they realize that now maybe the way that they're being evaluated and the stuff they have to do is much more confronting than they expected. And I warn people about this, that it, like you said very nicely, I like this analogy a lot, is, it's a being thing. It's not a doing thing. You have to really want to be a certain type of person to do this job. You have to believe in the idea of being someone who orchestrates and coordinates and leads and drives outcomes and wants to kind of do that sort of thing. You have that sort of brain or that sort of personality, as opposed to someone who just like wants to wear a nice suit and be in a nice desk and have a title, because that lasts not very long. And unfortunately, I do think C-suite executives, not all of them, obviously, but C-suite roles they attract that. And I think it's an important thing for not only people to think about before they take the role, but people who are recruiting people should be thinking about that too. Is this person really up for this job, or do they just want this job?
Yeah, that's right. One other thing that kind of brings to mind as well, though, is that there's the doing versus the being. But another important thing regarded to the doing is managing expectations, right? Because the one, fun, sometimes a little maddening aspect of being a revenue leader is no matter what you sold, no matter how much you're growing, there's only one next job, which is more, right? And it's like that scene from Mad Men where Don and Roger are pitching Dow Chemical on, taking over their account and whatnot. And Don says, while he's in a rant, you know what happiness is? It's the moment before you want more happiness. And that's why I always think about these jobs. But the problem is sometimes there's different levels of more happiness that you can feasibly and realistically get on the next session. So those expectations need to be managed. And the only real way to manage those expectations, because of the optics of being someone in that position, being responsible for them, is to be really strong analytically and to be able to make a case through numbers and having the right insights and the right information and the right data collected on what's realistic to be able to achieve at any given moment. So it's not making excuses for future poor performance, but instead it's a data-driven, quantitatively substantiated expectation of what's realistic in the future, and tying it back to the relationships with the rest of the C-suite, what it might take to get there from an investment perspective.
Yeah, look, I love it, and you're right. I think that you have to sort of like have a different mission mindset in this job because you know there is always the same story with anyone who's pursuing a role like this. I don't even remember doing movie analogies, which I'm a big person on this, so I really love that you're doing it. I do it all the time. There's a great movie with Robert Redford from the 70s called The Candidate. I remember this movie. It's a great movie. And he was like local politician. Redford was a perfect person for this. Good looking, kind of great talker. And,
yeah.
They had him run for president more as a way to improve his profile, not to actually win. It was sort of like a way to get him just exposure because, he's like, that's what you do. You run for president so people know you more. And of course, he ended up winning at the end. And there's this great scene after all this shit they went through. He
was
wins.
The dog that caught the fire truck.
Yeah, he goes in the room with Gene Hackman was his campaign manager, and he looks at me and goes, "Now what do we do?" It's the end of the movie. He's like, "Now what do we do?" And it's a classic example of like, be careful what you ask for. And I see people a lot of times fighting to get a job that they really shouldn't take. Because they're more driven by they want to get to yes. Because they're salespeople and they like to be asked to they don't want to close the deal as opposed to they don't want the job. And this is not the kind of job to do that with. It's one you really have to be kind of ready for a mission of sorts. And that
no, not at all. And it can make it harder, I think, for if someone who takes a CRO job, realizes it's not for them, doesn't work out, wants to go find their next role as a VP sales or something like that. It can actually be harder to get that role because people see your resume and think, okay, well, you just really want to be a CRO again. And it can be actually, I think, tougher to take that different path.
Yeah. So, walk me through this if you don't mind. Then if you look at your course, the course, what are the kind of the core principles that you think are the pillars, like the way that you frame the role for people? What are the things that you think you emphasize most if you look at the way you structure the curriculum?
Sure. So the program as a whole has 7 courses, and it's designed to be, as you might imagine, pretty much everything that a CRO needs to know, whether they're doing the job currently or aspire to do it in the future. And so that starts with designing the go-to-market organization. That's the course that I teach. Then on top of that, there's customer lifecycle management, which is basically managing all the customer-facing teams. There's a course on team leadership called Leading High-Performing Teams. Analytics course, revenue operations and strategy, right? Key muscle to be able to empower frontline folks with technology, but also extract data to guide those insights. Pricing strategy, of course, one of the biggest levers of value, especially in the short term, that most folks don't have any professional training on before they become responsible for it. And then we have a course called Leading with Investors and Boards, which is basically about not just how to run the go-to-market organization, but how to be a CRO and operate that level and make sure that, for example, you're getting all the resources that you need to put your organization in a position to succeed. Also, how you can make sure that you're guiding the organization in the way that's most valuable for the company, because sometimes that's maximizing profitability, sometimes it's maximizing revenue, sometimes it's defending market share.
Yep. So who is responsible for the curriculum? Is it you writing it yourself, or you have a collaboration? Like, what's the way in which the curriculum is generated?
Yeah, so we pulled together some really excellent practitioners, folks who've been in leadership roles at a bunch of different unicorns from the tech industry, a lot of software folks. We've got a great instructor of pricing, guy named Sergio Corbo from GE and a couple other companies. And if you know those industries, pricing is a huge lever of value there. We have the head of talent for Madison Dearborn Partners, a guy named Chris Chandler, who is maybe in charge of hiring more CROs than anybody in America. Madison Dearborn is like the original mid-market private equity fund, lots of portfolio companies. So he teaches leading with investors and boards. So the first thing is putting together a great team of instructors and making sure that they're experts in what they've done, in what they cover, but also that they're folks who can speak with credibility of cutting expertise while layering in, and this is really kind of like the University of Chicago's unique secret sauce to business education, what made the University of Chicago Business School the regularly #1 ranked school in the world for MBA, pairing kind of cutting edge practitioner point of view with timeless principles from psychology, economics, quantitative methods, all these kinds of things.
Amazing. Great. And how long is the course? What's the length of time someone takes?
So the whole program is 10 months long. So it's basically a 1-year program. There's 7 courses in it, and they're kind of divided to kind of cover all those things that we mentioned. The courses themselves range somewhere between 3 weeks on the short end to 8 weeks on the long end. There's a little buffer time between courses, so you can still have time to go on vacation and whatever else. But a really important thing too is the format of the program. So this is a very unique and frankly innovative educational product. You think about professional education and business, you generally think about an MBA or something of that nature. It's on campus, or it's evenings and weekends, but it's in person. It's an interruption in your career that doesn't have as high opportunity costs because it's for folks in their 20s. But everyone in this program is already super successful, already super accomplished. They're in their 30s, in their 40s, some people even in their 50s. And these are folks with really high opportunity costs, big, complicated lives, a lot going on. They don't have time to go back to a 1-year program or be jet setting all the world to meet in person. So we made the program mostly remote, is what I call it. So classes are live online over Zoom. So it's that in classroom experience, but from the convenience of wherever it is that you live or wherever you have to be traveling for a client opportunity that week. But then we also wanted to make sure that you have that same experience of an in-person program where you're building deep personal relationships with a lot of folks in your cohort that are going to last you the rest of your life, the rest of your career. And so to make that happen, part of it is how we design group projects and other kind of like live social activities, things of this nature. But then we also have an in-person event that's coming up in September, actually, where we get everybody together for 4 days and kind of mix, mingle, have a kind of great old school sales boondoggle with lots of social events and some semi-plausible academic content, and just get everybody together and kind of turn those online relationships into in-person, flesh and blood relationships that are going to last forever. Because the education is super important for being able to kick ass at the job, but a big part of the long-term value of the program is that network and those relationships that future opportunities come from, and also just humanity side of it.
Excellent. I love it. Similarly, too, I mean, my course is only for people who have already kind of advanced in their careers. I'm not looking to get some salesperson that wants to be a CRO someday. It's really important to have the right people. So I know that you have other things going on. Like, I'm just curious to know what those are and if how they may kind of tie into what you're currently doing with the course.
Yeah, sure. I have a software company that we're working on rolling out. We can maybe talk about that in greater depth in another session, but it's, for me, been a really rewarding experience teaching go-to-market organization design while building the go-to-market organization at a startup company. Because the course itself, starts with you've reached product market fit, meaning you've got a set of product features that you've kind of worked out that works with a right set of customers, and you've got that sort of repeatable interaction understood to be able to sell profitably. And now you need to scale from that to a revenue organization that can make that sale happen with repeatedly acquirable assets, i.e. hiring people off the street. You don't need the founder involved to close every deal. And so as we're building this company and rolling out, it's really rewarding for me to be able to actually put the ideas from the course into practice in real time and just sort of see how they manifest. It's a nice little
Really cool. Yeah, we can
part of
talk more
being
about
part
that.
of
I'd like
academia
to.
and
I know
corporate
you had
time.
shared with me something about it offline, but thought I'd mention it. So I wanted to, this is, as I suspected, it was a great conversation and we're unusually like-minded in this respect. First person I spoke to that's actually doing the same thing I am. It's kind of interesting. So it's kind of cool. And I do appreciate, the offer to collaborate. And I think that it's great to know that there's other people out there trying to solve the same problem because it needs to be solved. And I can't do it all on my own, although I'd like to. Again, I want to thank you for joining me. Great conversation. Again, Daniel Frailey, Chief Revenue Officer program at the University of Chicago. Take a look at it. And Daniel, as I say, thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure, Warren. Anybody who's interested in the program, just find me on LinkedIn, Daniel, F as in Frank, R as in Richard, Ailey. And I'm the younger looking one. The older looking guy is my dad. But we'll put you in the right direction. Warren,
Awesome.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to be here. It's been great.
Of course. And we'll be talking soon.
That's right.
Thank you for listening to the CRO Spotlight Podcast. The CRO Collective's mission is to help CROs succeed and help founders and CEOs build CRO-ready organizations. You can find out more information about our services at thecrocollective.com. That's thecrocollective.com. And we look forward to having you join us next time.